Hi there, I'll present this prune to you. It's delicious, from our own garden. It's really juicy, and of course it grew without fertilizer, just based on the sun. I wanted to first of all say one thing about this Oslo killer. It is a horrible story, and this guy was super efficient, which is a problem, and has to do with the weapons that he used. It's amazing, and practice and the ability to do that. Everybody's talking about terrorism, and Coughlin and other people and Alex Jones are going on just doing, let's say, disaster tourism. I still believe that you will never prevent something like this to happen, because if somebody decides that a race or society is impure and becomes perfectionist about it and vain about it, he can lock himself in and just brainwash himself. It's not so much an issue of will or something like that. It's more like an accident. Like if everything is okay and everybody's alright and everybody behaves relaxed, you will not notice when somebody decides on his own to hatch some kind of a purist plan. It's just like, well, it's just, you're not gonna notice it. I don't believe it at all, and I don't think screaming about it will solve it. I don't think immense wealth will solve it. I don't think anything will solve it. You will simply have these type of events. And what is interesting is about it is that, of course, you can devise a road towards egotistic, narcissistic, perfectionist and purist thought in people. For instance, by talking about, well, by being a right-wing anti-Muslim, and then comparing one religion against the other, and then trying to make people conclude that Christianity is better. If you do that, you make one of the other superior, their concepts, so you're not going to prevent somebody to become purist and perfectionist about it, because, you know, after all, they're not physical things, so you can, like a word is perfect. It's always the same word. If you change one letter, it's a different word. And that's basically the problem with these things. They're like, you can have perfection in concepts, in language, because words are unique. You cannot have perfection in real life, but even there you can have some objects that are perfect or that are coveted and whatever, but it's a completely different subject. I wanted to illustrate one thing that I think is fundamentally different between the US and Germany, because people like Max Kaiser and others are going on about the Germany 4.0 and it's so evil. I really don't think so. I really, okay, first of all, what's new about self-interested huge industrial countries? We have one which used to be America, we have another which is China, we have another which is Russia. And they're all just doing their thing. So why is anybody complaining about an industrial country expanding its sphere of influence? But the question is also, what type of influence do they have? What type of influence do they want to have? Because, and I think the best demonstration of that is a link to a new development that was sent to me because I'm a member of LinkedIn Solar groups, and this is just a new article. Let's see here. Low-cost solar thermal plants at the heart of Algerian-German research push. Development of a new generation of large-scale low-cost solar thermal power plants is the focus of a joint research agreement signed between Algeria and Germany. And you, well, for your information, Germany, Siemens, those companies have also been building all these big solar power plants in Spain. They're German. According to an interview done with Bernard Milo of the German Aerospace Center, DLR, electricity from solar thermal plants could cost as little as 7 euro cents per kilowatt hour by 2020. If the power plants are in prime locations, even factoring the high steel prices and other costs. So even with the manipulation by JP Morgan, they're still going to be cheaper. Electricity from solar thermal plants currently costs 20 blah blah blah. Technology and science all there. It's just a question of transferring the knowledge to those who have the sunshine and optimizing the technology to make it competitive. This is an example. This is the way Germany acts. It has technology, it has mines, it has, of course, on the long term it could have an ambition of importing solar power from the desert, and it's supplying that technology to Algeria. Maybe Algeria has tons of oil, I'm not sure. Then maybe it's a trade-off like that, but I don't think it is. And they're going to use it for desalination, which means that the Algerians can grow food. It's protection also, because Europe is threatened by North African people that are going to starve if the climate change is making it too difficult for them to grow food. And if you think that's unlikely, then look at Texas and look at the US. It's under a heat dome. Plants don't like that, and sometimes they're really sensitive. Like in Colombia, coffee beans are not growing as well, and farmers are trying to get to the cities to make a living because they cannot grow coffee anymore. As if, you know, if every farmer in the US moved into the cities, there would be no food in the US. It doesn't work. You cannot flee. You cannot move away from the effects of climate change. You have to counter them. You have to be a human being with intelligence and do something about it. Well, Germans are different, I think, in a way from the Americans, because Germany is not so much money dominated, in my opinion. It's more, the mentality is stronger than the money. And if you compare that to the US, where you have a company called Reflectech, which is a company that makes mirrors for solar power plants. And the history of that product, I cannot show it here, but I actually have a little piece of it here because I asked a sample, which is plastic with a silver layer on it. Very cheap to make, of course. It's sold for an incredible price per square foot, $18 I believe per square foot. It's amazingly expensive. And that's because they first researched it 20 years, which is a delay tactic. Because of course, you know, everybody knows that if you vaporize silver onto plastic, you get a perfect mirror, because silver is the most reflective material around. So 98% reflection, and then you have to have a protection layer on top of it. Well, you can use any type of strong plastic that is scratch resistant against the abrasive effects of sand. And they've been researching that, and basically after 2 months you can have reached a conclusion, okay, this is it. And then you can, of course, you have to test it a year or two out in the desert. But the product is so cheap that if it's too scratchy and too dirty, you simply remove it, you burn it, you take the silver, you reuse the silver, and because that's left over in the ashes. And they sell it for a huge price, and they also have the patent on it, so nobody else can make easy, cheap, let's say on a roll silver mirrors, and then they devise a process around it, which is also very expensive. And the Germans, they had a different approach, and they simply have silvered aluminium, which is very smart because aluminium doesn't rust very good. And then they have a cover of some kind of silicate, I believe, which is very smart because it's as hard as sand, so it won't be scratching. And it's a better product, I think. And I spoke to a guy of that company in Germany, and they tried to get into the US solar mirror market, and they couldn't, because of course it was protected by these guys selling the plastic shit. And I think the difference is that it's not about dominance, because if you give a country an energy source, that's like giving them an oil well. And if you give them the technology and you make a partnership to develop it, of course, you know, Algeria has territory, so it lives there, so there has to be a deal. But Germany is not making bases there and exploiting the Algerians by doing that. Actually, they're giving them everything they need to live, because they have sunshine, they have seawater, and now they have an energy source that will be dirt cheap. You know, I think that's good. I think that's more like, that's a difference. I think there's a difference. Maybe you don't agree. Maybe you see all kinds of good brought around the world by the US, and I'm not making the US as a whole evil, but it's the preference for finding some way to exploit a situation financially in the US that is prevalent over the preference in Germany to find smart solutions and solve actual problems, because that brings wealth. That's what you want. And apparently it's quite deeply ingrained. So they annexated East Germany, which was a huge cost, and now they basically are supporting southern European states, and they're giving them, imagine if they give Italy, South Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece and Turkey, all these countries, I don't know if Turkey is involved actually, if they give them these solar power plants, the technology, that is actually solving a problem for Germany, because then that makes the balance better in Europe. That makes these countries able to take care of themselves better, because they have the energy, they can start factories, they can start desalination, they have the irrigation for their agriculture, they can make the fertilizer, all this stuff. And I think that's a difference. And so I'm positive about it. I don't think Europe or any country in Europe should necessarily default if the stuff is there to keep things going. And I'm pro, of course I'm vehemently anti-fossil fuels. But for instance, if it's used for building solar power plants in Algeria, then that's a huge, that's like the wisest investment you can make of this. Ultimately, everything has to align, and I think that should be a law eventually, that you cannot burn anything and that you can only use sun energy or renewable energy to do anything. Because, and that's just make it a game, but if the sun doesn't power your vehicle, if it doesn't heat your home, which it all can, and if it doesn't cause your crops to grow, which it already does, and if it doesn't generate your fertilizer and everything else, then you're moving backwards. Then you're basically not adapting. It's like we humans have to help technology evolve to become just like us, like able to live off whatever the sun provides. It's an amazing video about connection between, let's say, the red thread in history of sun worship, where it's actually claimed that there's also a large overlap between the different mythologies in terms of there's a sun god, and then there's 12 disciples, which are the 12 let's say things in the zodiac, that the sun at the winter solstice ends up in the star sign Crux, that it then disappears, and that it then after 3 days reappears, which is the resurrection. And it's amazing. So I'll put a link to that video here. I cannot check it, I cannot confirm it or anything, but I do think that it's quite useful and I'll try to see if I can put some work into that, to find the overlap between religions and acknowledge that we are actually always have been, let's say, praying to celestial constants like stars in the sun. And it's likely there's a logic behind it, because if you have a mythology, you have to base it on something. You have to prove. Let's say if you are a priest and you want to be important, and you start telling stories to people, and then there's always this reference, which is the stars and the sun and the behavior of the seasons and everything. So it's quite logical that these mythologies will have developed all the same reference, because it's there all the time. You can't forget about it. If you forget about it, 3 days later you see it again. You can make up a new story about it. And what's funny, I think, is that every time there has been, so basically you take a natural phenomena like the tides, and then so that's there, everybody knows that, there's no power to be derived from that, but then you personalize it. So you say, well, this is the angry tide, and there's a god there, there's Neptune, and he's doing all that stuff, and we have to and then if you know a little bit about the regularities in it, but other people don't, then you can say, well, tomorrow it's going to be very high tide because Neptune is angry because you haven't given me lots of stuff, which is just let's say alignment of the moon. So that's why it's useful to watch those things. Lo and behold, before you know it, you have a tidal worship religion, and you are all powerful. Well, that has happened many times in, I think, human history. Priests have hijacked natural phenomena. But I have to stop because I'm at 15 minutes. Thanks for listening.